has been disastrous. They've had their private property rights trampled on, their personal rights trampled on. They've had their personal safety trampled on by gun-toting, bulletproof vest-wearing, SWAT teams that are really biologists pretending to be tough guys, and their livelihoods, and in some cases literally driven to bankruptcy by zealots in the Fish and Wildlife Service. In other words, I have very little faith in the Fish and Wildlife Service. And in an attempt to work with them, I have voted for Republicans and Democrats in the Department of Interior to include Fish and Wildlife Service directors and undersecretaries and deputy secretaries. And so this brings us today to this bill. And this Recovering America's Wildlife Action is a bill that I was an original co-sponsor of, along with 16 Democrats and 15 other Republicans. I got on this bill because it sent funding to state, I emphasize, state fish and wildlife agencies to proactively, and I stress proactively, address and keep species off, I stress off, the Endangered Species Act lists. Should be the goal of every conservationist in the world. Instead, we see from our federal bureaucracy and some of their stakeholders this desire to keep critters on the endangered species list. I've never understood it. So when Senator Blunt and Heinrich brought this to me, I said, this makes sense. It emphasizes what states can do. And they're more responsive to their constituents, more nimble. Frankly, they're more attuned to the situation in front of them. Instead, and this, Mr. Chairman, is why I voted no on the substitute that creates the bill that's in front of us. It reduces the money going to states and instead shifts it over to the very people who say, if you just give us more money, we can do better for you. Just give us more money and we can respond in a faster way. Forgive my skepticism and the skepticism of the people of North Dakota, but I am so tired of bureaucrats who say, if you just give us more, we could help the landowners more. I don't care how fast they do it or how slowly they do it, the outcome's never right. I have yet to have an appeal, for example, on a waterfowl production area appeal, ever go the landowner's way. Not under the previous administration. In fact, under this administration, literally dozens of appeals have never been acted on. In fact, a letter sent by farmers over a year ago to the director has never even been returned, has never been responded to. So I don't see how giving them more money to not work helps my landowners. So with that, again, I want to applaud Senators Heinrich and Blunt and the people that got on this bill and made it a very, very good bill before today. But this is not that bill. So my amendment's simple. It simply strips the substitute, returns the bill to its original form, which is what I and many others on the committee signed on to. And I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting my amendment to remove the substitute, return the bill, and to its evenly bipartisan form. With that, I yield and thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Kramer for, Senator Kramer for his amendment. As we know, Chairman, we've been talking a lot about this bill, and the agreement that we reached on today's substitute was difficult, but it was necessary so we could bring this bipartisan bill before this committee. However, as I've stated publicly in the past, I support the bill as introduced, as Senator Kramer described, the first one that was introduced by Senator Heinrich and Blunt, and for that reason, I will be supporting Senator Kramer's amendment.
Fair enough. Anyone else on Senator Kramer's amendment number 4? Anyone else? All right. I now move to adopt the Kramer amendment number 4 to S 2372. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Bozeman.
Yes.
Ms. Capito.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
No.
Mr. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. Duckworth.
No by proxy.
Ms. Ernst.
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Brown.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Henhoff.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Kelly.
Ms. Kelly, no by proxy.
Ms. Lummis.
Aye.
Mr. Markey.
No by proxy.
Mr. Murphy.
No by proxy.
Mr. Padilla.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
No by proxy.
Mr. Shelby.
No by proxy.
Ms. Scotland.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Whitehouse. No. Mr. Wicker.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 9, the nays are 11.
The yeas are 9 and the nays are 11. The amendment is not agreed to. I understand that Senator Lummis has an amendment that she'd like to offer. I just want to say our thanks very much to you for trying to work with us to make it to the finish line here today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I call up my amendment, Lummis number 1. It's very straightforward. It requires any data used by federal agencies for Endangered Species Act determinations to be shared with states affected by that determination. That's it. As we've heard in testimony from both Democrats and Republican witnesses in previous hearings, ESA listing decisions have enormous impacts on communities, from some who love recreating on public lands to those who ranch it or farm it, to the kind of people that Senator Kramer heard from in North Dakota when he discussed his last amendment. These decisions literally affect lives and livelihoods, especially for those of us in the West. If members of this committee are willing to trust states with billions of dollars in additional conservation funding in perpetuity, as the sponsors and supporters of RAWA indicate they are, then we should be able to trust states with the data that federal agencies have used in making listing determinations. I trust Governor Carper as much as I trust Senator Carper. This amendment is about transparency and about good government, and I would ask for my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this. Doesn't matter when this information is provided, and it doesn't, this proprietary nature of the data argument just doesn't wash when we're spending this much money on decisions and we're trusting these states to manage to a standard that they're not even allowed to look at. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you.
I asked for a recorded vote, by the way.
Okay, you'll get one. Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would thank Senator Lummis for her good government transparency amendment. I will be in support of it. I think she makes a great case that these decisions are making or have huge impacts, and why wouldn't we share the data with our state partners? So I am voting in favor of the Lummis amendment.
All right, thank you. Any other senator care to be recognized on this Lummis Amendment number 1? Anyone else? All right. And if not, I now move to adopt Lummis Amendment number 1 to S2372. Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Bozeman. Yes. Mrs. Capito.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
No.
Mr. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. Duckworth.
Duckworth votes no by proxy.
Ms. Ernst.
Ernst is yes by proxy.
Mr. Graham.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Inhofe.
Yes by proxy.
Mr. Kelly.
No by proxy.
Ms. Lummis.
Ms. Lummis?
Mr. Markey.
No by proxy.
Mr. Murphy.
No by proxy.
Mr. Padilla.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
No by proxy.
Mr. Shelby.
Yes by proxy.
Ms. Stalno?
No by proxy.
Mr. Sullivan? Aye. Mr. Whitehouse?
No by proxy.
Mr. Wicker?
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman?
No.
Chairman, the yeas are 10, the nays are 10.
The yeas are 10, the nays are 10. The amendment is defeated. I understand. Thank you again. Thank you very much. Senator Cardin, yeah, we're going to back up. And then Senator Sullivan will come to you next. Senator Cardin has an amendment that he'd like to offer. Please proceed. Pardon amendment number 1.
I appreciate that my Republican friends are here to listen to it. I'm sorry my Democratic friends are not. I'm a little bit perplexed as to this amendment being even controversial. It codifies an existing program, so it takes on the turf of the Congress rather than the executive branch. It's our responsibility to do this. It's been in existence since 1985. There's no substantive changes in regards to how the program operates. And it provides balance between how the underlying bill operates and coastal habitat restoration. So it is a voluntary program. There's no land use issues here as far as private ownership is concerned. So we don't get involved in any of our traditional controversial areas. That's why the bill that I introduced with Senator Graham, bipartisan bill, was introduced in June of last year. And I recognize that we need to be able to act on bills in this committee. Now, this land bill, this wildlife bill's been involved, and we've had discussions about it. But those of us who live in coastal areas are entitled to have our considerations as well. We all want to work in a cooperative way, but I haven't heard one reason why we shouldn't move this bill forward. We've had no hearings in the committee. I don't know why. The House has had hearings on it. Senate has not had hearings on it. So, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, I'm frustrated as to why we have not been able to get the same type of considerations on coastal habitat rehab as we have on the underlying bill. So that's the reason why this amendment is being offered. I said it was bipartisan. And I'd just like to get an explanation from the committee why this would be opposed.
Do other senators care to be recognized on this amendment? If not, I now move to adopt Cardin Amendment number 1 to S23.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Hi,
please.
Senator Cardin, does this program already exist?
Yes, it does.
So what does it do in
It's-
addition to it already existing? Because look, I'm always, when
statutory
states are trying to, get a little help, I'm open ears, right? I'm always trying to get a little help for my state, and you'll see that in a minute.
And I appreciate the question. It provides a statutory base, but it also provides an authorized level. I have to be
You mean on funding?
on funding. Right now, there is no authorized level. The current appropriation, I think it's 18, if I'm right, I think it's 18 million that's currently being spent in this program. We have an authorized level starting at 20, going up to 25 million. So that would be new authorization. There is no authorization today. And the actual appropriation is 18 million today. My number's right, 18?
So it's plussing up the,
No, we're not, there's no appropriation here. It's just an authorized level.
so it's authorizing more for an existing program?
That's correct.
Does
A
it change
program
the
that is
program at all?
currently is operative, but is not under statutory authority.
Okay.
The appropriators must have done it at some point over the years. We're taking on our committee's jurisdiction here by putting it in the code.
I'm just throwing this out, and I don't want to get in front of the ranking members. Is there interest in trying to work. I'm just trying to understand this, and if, you know, I get nervous about easements and things in my state, but if your state wants that, I'm just trying to.
It's a totally voluntary program, so it has to be initiated by the owner, whether it's public or private. There is no this is strictly a voluntary program, and it's technical support for those who want to move in this direction to deal with habitat on coastal areas.
Yeah, would you like for me to weigh
Yeah.
in here? Yes. Well, I am going to oppose this amendment, not because I oppose the coastal program. I heard Senator Cardin discuss this in the earlier meeting along with Senator Whitehouse and the coastal. I did raise the question, which I think they gave me a good answer to, as to whether the existing bill could help with some of the coastal wildlife, and it seems like it's not flexible enough to really use that for the state fish and wildlife folks, which is the crux of this. But it was difficult to get to where we are right now in trying to negotiate all of the different things. So I would like to work with you and Senator Graham to have a hearing and you know, bring this before the committee and discuss it. And so we could all appreciate where it's falling short because it hasn't been reauthorized. I think, to me, that would be the preferred route.
I would support that too, to work with you in really good faith, because I'm looking at this.
Our problem is that I regret we haven't had a hearing on it. I think we should have had a hearing. This is not a bill that we introduced it earlier in this Congress. The challenge is that if the underlying bill becomes the only vehicle we have available, the absence of action on our committee makes it virtually difficult, because it'll probably end up in some omnibus bill along the way, and the fact that we have no committee action on it means it'll be left by the side. That's my frustration, Mr. Chairman. I don't disagree with the ranking member and the senator from Alaska. We should have those discussions. I'm more than happy. That's why we introduced it as current practice rather than looking at changes, because we knew that we hadn't had that discussion. I would welcome having that discussion, but my concern is that if this committee takes a pass on it at this particular moment, the odds are we will not get back to it in this Congress.
Could we delay the vote on the bill that it would be attached to, so you don't have that problem?
That's fine with me if we have the chairman and ranking member willing to do that, because at time they have to sign off on any opportunity for this bill to move forward. If I have their assurances, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. For now, I'm just going to suggest we regularly just go ahead and vote. If the votes are there, fine. If they're not, what you both ranking member and Senator Sullivan suggested for us to re-engage, and maybe with the scheduling of a hearing in a timely manner. But for now, I'd like for us to go ahead and vote. And with that, any other senator want to be recognized? All right. If not, then the clerk will call the roll on card amendment number 1 to 2372.
Mr. Bozeman.
No by proxy.
I have to send you to the floor on this. I can have Senator.
After this.
No, I have to send you.
No.
Mr. Carter.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
No by proxy.
Ms. Duckworth.
Yes, by proxy.
Ms. Ernst.
No by proxy.
Mr. Graham.
No by proxy.
Mr. Inhofe.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye, by proxy.
Ms. Lemon.
No by proxy.
Mr. Markey.
You didn't vote?
Aye, by proxy.
Mr. Merkley.
Ben's
Aye,
going
by
to vote by
proxy.
proxy.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye, by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
Aye, by proxy.
Mr. Shelby.
No by proxy.
Ms. Stabenow.
Aye, by proxy.
Mr. Sullivan.
No for now, but I'll work with you, Ben.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye, by proxy.
Mr. Wicker.
No by proxy.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye. How did Lindsay vote? He voted no.
Thank you.
Yeas are 10, nays are 10.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the amendment fails, and we are asking for additional amendments.
Correct.
Anybody have an amendment? Senator Sullivan.
Yes, Madam Chair. I have 3 amendments. I'll try to be brief. I'd like to call up Sullivan number 1. This is to make additional federal land available for selection under the Alaska Native Vietnam Era Veterans Allotment Act. So, guess I'm going to lose this. Madam Chair, dating back to the early 20th century, there were various federal programs that existed to grant Alaska Natives parcels of land in Alaska, up to 160 acres. That dated back to 1909. In 1971, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act extinguished the ability of Alaska Natives to select these land allotments. However, thousands of Alaska Natives served their country during the Vietnam era, and they missed this deadline. So here you have indigenous people in my state serving in a war that a lot of American men were trying to avoid, and they missed the deadline to apply for these allotments. Total injustice. In 2019, we passed the Dingell Act, bipartisan, that included my bill, the Alaska Native Vietnam Era Veterans Land Allotment Act. That just said if you were serving in the military during the Vietnam era, you have a chance to apply for an allotment, which you missed because you were serving your country in the military. This program allows approximately 2,800 Alaska Natives, by the way, who serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country, to apply for congressionally promised Native allotments that they missed the opportunity to do so because they're serving and fighting in the jungles of Vietnam. Pretty strong equity issues. These land selections were largely limited to BLM, but the Dingell Act, which passed, said U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would study whether to make lands available for this program also. Fish and Wildlife Service, in accordance with the law, issued a study and recommended additional acreage to be included in the lands available from which Alaska Native Vietnam era veterans could choose. All my bill does is take what Fish and Wildlife Service said here's the additional land that you can choose from. There's a lot of talk in this committee and this Senate about taking care of our veterans. This is 100% taking care of our veterans. There's a lot of talk, particularly my friends on the other side of the aisle, about racial equity, environmental justice, racial justice. This is 100% racial equity. These are men and women who are indigenous people serving in Vietnam, and when they came home, they not only got spit on because they were Vietnam veterans, not only got discriminated against because they're Alaska Native, but they were then told, you can't apply for your allotment, which you've been able to do for 100 years. All we're trying to do is fix it. If you believe in supporting our vets and you believe in racial equity, this should be a unanimous vote, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan, and I plan to support your amendment at this point because we are waiting for people to come back from a vote. I will suspend the vote on this, and you can go to your next amendment. Make the case for that.
Okay, Madam Chair, this is another one. If you believe in racial equity, this is simple too. This is a Sullivan number 2, to clarify treatment of authentic Alaska Native articles of handicrafts containing non-edible migratory bird parts under the Migratory Treaty Bird Act. So let me just explain this one. For thousands of years, inclusion of bones, feathers, and non-edible parts in traditional handicrafts from Alaska Native people was commonplace in Alaska Native cultures. However, in light of a number of years ago, when widely celebrated Tlingit artists were cited by Fish and Wildlife Service for including feathers in a piece offered for sale, somebody actually got fined for that in Alaska. The result was the Alaska Federation of Natives passed a resolution saying we need a legislative fix to this problem. We're not going to eat the birds, but we can use their feathers for handicrafts. Now, why does that matter? In certain Alaska Native villages, the men and women who create handicrafts are the #1 economic drivers of these communities because they can sell their handicrafts to tourists and things like this. All this amendment does, it would recognize the legitimate subsistence needs of Alaska Natives and allow the sale of handicrafts that include non-edible migratory bird parts. That's it. Handicraft sales are often small but important part of the economic activity for our native villages. Other laws, such as the Marine Mammal Protection Act, include similar subsistence exemptions for other species, and this amendment seeks to apply equal treatment for this subset of the Alaska Native artistic community. The amendment is unanimously supported by the Alaska Native members from the Migratory Bird Co-Management Council, the Alaska Federation of Natives. Again, racial equity for disadvantaged communities. This is a no-brainer. We hope that we can pass that as well.
Again, I would ask my colleagues to support this amendment. I think it does, it's an interesting amendment, really, when you think about the culture and the economic opportunities that brings. So I would hope that we could have a successful vote on that, but we're going to suspend the vote on that and let you go to I think it's
Number
Sullivan
3,
Amendment
Sullivan, number 3. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
This is a simple amendment. It just makes the sub-account here subject to appropriations. We recognize this is important legislation that we're debating. Protecting, conserving Americans' countless species of plants, wildlife is a noble cause. We care about it back home in Alaska. However, funding decisions for this cause should be made on an annualized basis, the way other appropriations bills are. Singling out this bill for permanent funding, I don't think makes sense. This bill is not the answer to a broken Endangered Species Act problem. The bill turns a blind eye to the fact that states and federal agencies are at the mercy of serial litigants who abuse the ESA. This is a huge problem in my state. This bill does not propose a realistic pay-for. $1.3 billion in new annual mandatory spending is provided by this bill. This bill should go through the normal appropriations process that most every other bill in the U.S. Senate goes through. And that's what my amendment would do.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. And I, again, will urge my colleagues to vote yes on this amendment. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and I think it's right and proper that we know that this bill has some, when we get the score back, is going to have some issues in terms of the pay-for. So I think this is the responsible way to go. So if we can suspend right now, I'm going to, we're going to see how we go forward here. The committee stands in recess until 1:30. Oh. The committee stands in recess until 1:30, where we will meet in the President's Room.